The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I was about to say welcome back as if we'd been here for a while. It's Friday. It's got that sort of feel to it. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are webcasting to you absolutely live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And so thrilled to be here with you on this beautiful Friday in spring. It's May, and a whole lot of things have been going on. We've just completed our Autism Awareness Month here in the United States, but it's May, and it's time to kick other things into gear, right? We've taken, at least at my house, we took down our blue lights yesterday, but it's a reminder of the fact that there is work yet to be done. And so we talk about that kind of thing here on the show. In fact, we talk about autism from a 360-degree perspective, how you and I can be more efficient, more effective in the roles that we are playing having to do with autism, whether you're a parent, teacher, or practitioner who's working with a child or a young adult who's on the autism spectrum, or you yourself are on the autism spectrum. We know that there is information that it's absolutely vital that, depending on your individual circumstances, that you have access to. Well, that's what we are about here, and hopefully give you some things to think about and tweak as you go through your day. This entire show is meant to be completely interactive, so we live and breathe by your input. When you write in and tell us things that you want to see in upcoming segments, we're very excited to hear that. We like to take your questions. We have a bunch of experts that are going to be in this studio on the show today. So if you've got things that you're dealing with, we want to be helpful and useful in, I don't want to make it sound as though we're giving child-specific information, because we can't do that. That's the one thing that we cannot do. When you write in and tell us about what's happening in your life, that's a small snippet of the whole, right? We can point you in directions, and our experts can help you to know some of the things that might be going on, but we can't give child-specific advice. That would be a disservice to your kids and to all of our kids. But still, so much information that we can help you to hook you up to. Very important that we do that. So how do you get in touch with us? How do you get a hold of us? Emily's going to start to show you some of the different ways on the screen. Pick the way that works best for you. I'm going to remind you that if you want to watch the show live, you can go to www.autism-live.com. When you go there, you'll see the show runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you're bored and you got some time, you can always go to that site, and we are always here doing something, talking with somebody about something having to do with autism. But for 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and that's from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's 10 a.m. to noon Pacific Standard Time, and you can do the math wherever you are in the world. But we are live during that time, and during that time, there's a feature on our website that says questions we're answering right now. I have a little button that allows that to be interactive and completely live with you. So you can type whatever you want to type, hit enter, and we are connected. It shows up right here on my screen, and I can ask our experts the questions that you pose. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to log in. We don't know who you are, so it's completely anonymous. If you want us to get back to you, though, we don't have your contact information. You can include it in that information. I have a way of editing that before I post it, so we can maintain your anonymity, which is really kind of important. But there are many other ways, as Emily just showed you, and there are other ways in which to watch the show, all of which are free. You have to love that. I always remind you at the top of the show that I am not an expert in autism. There are many things that I am, but that is not one of them, not even pretending to be an expert in autism. I am an Autism mom. My son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. He's about to be 10 this summer. And I strive every day to learn more, do better, and show up for him and to pay back in increments the help and support that we got, because heaven knows if people hadn't stepped up and if I hadn't gotten lucky and had people literally fall into my life at the ideal moments to say, this child needs this support, I don't know where we would be. I really honestly don't know. I get a shiver up my spine every time I think about it, but then I remind myself that I have a lot to be grateful for, and there's a lot of work to be done. And I always like to tell you, I want to help you to get as lucky as I got. That, it's different circumstances. You're living in different places, and you have different pluses and minuses in your what do I have going on column. But if there's any way that I can help you and support you on your journey through autism, from a very heartfelt place, would like to do that. So please write in and tell us what you have going on. Tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly. We take it all here, right? We had a mom on yesterday who said, "Oh, I'm going to cry," and I said, "Yeah, we do that every day here, right? We cry and then we move on. And sometimes it's happy tears, sometimes it isn't, but we've got work to do. We've got progress to make. So join us on that journey, the journey towards progress. We like to start every morning with something that we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we try to make sense of it, pare it down so that it's not this big psychological term, make sense of it in our individual lives. It's so important that we make friends at some point. It's on the to-do list. A lot of things to do when you're first diagnosed with autism or your child is diagnosed with autism, but making friends with the jargon needs to be on the list. I didn't believe that in the beginning, and it cost me some time and some efficiency. So we try to do it in these little slivers every day. It's like taking your daily vitamin, and then eventually you go, wow, I have some of these terms in my head and I kind of understand what they mean. How very exciting. Okay, so today's term, very important, task analysis. And I referenced this a little bit yesterday when we were talking about chaining. If you missed that, that was in yesterday's episode. Okay, so what is our actual definition for a task analysis? It's the process of breaking a complex skill or series of behaviors into smaller, teachable units. All right, that already starts to make a great deal of sense, right? Let's look at our working definition. A list of all the individual steps a child has to take in order to complete a task or a sequence of behaviors. Think about, and we talked with this a little bit yesterday with the chaining, about all the different tasks that you're having difficulty teaching your child. And ask yourself, if you were going to break this down, if you were an occupational therapist, if you were working with somebody who had never seen this skill, whether it was someone who'd had no exposure to it before, or some people like to think of it, if it's somebody who came from another planet, and how would you show them how to do this? And breaking down each individual step, how many steps would it be? I will tell you that when I first moved to California many years ago, one of my roommates was a young woman who was studying to be a physical therapist. And she mainly was working with patients who had had some sort of brain trauma. And part of her job, and I didn't understand what a task analysis was at that point, but part of her job was to continually break tasks down into a task analysis. So there were three of us young women living in one apartment, and every week or so she would say, I just need help for like an hour. And we'd say, okay, what do you need? And she would say, I need to observe you opening the refrigerator door, and break down all the different steps of opening the refrigerator door. And of course I would go, okay, look, I opened the refrigerator door. And she would say, okay, now I need you to slow it down. And this was before, because I'm that old, this is before everybody had video cameras where she could have taped it once and paused it. So I would stand in the kitchen and very slowly, and she would say, oh, did you see that? You just had to shift your weight because you had to be close enough, but you had to move out of the way of the door. And I would go, yeah, no, I never really thought about that before. This is true of so many things that we do. We don't think about it, all the different things that are involved with making the task completable. Is that even a word? But when we're teaching a skill to a child who's having difficulty learning, it is worthwhile to break it down into a task analysis. Now, two people might break it down into two entirely different task analyses. If you think about all the steps that it takes to brush your teeth, I've heard stories of, somebody saying, well, it's 12 steps, somebody saying it's 32 steps, right? It depends on how incrementally you need to break it down for the individual person learning it. But keep in mind, as we talked about with chaining yesterday, somebody could have skill area for, let's say there's 34 steps to brushing the teeth. If they have 31 of those skills, but they're missing 3 of them, it could prevent them from being able to actually do the entire task. So beneficial to do a task analysis on something, to be able to see all those steps, because then you have a place to start chaining and saying, okay, what does this person need to work on? What are the key steps here? What a lot of times what we found with my individual son is that if the task analysis was there and we taught, step 1, and then we noticed that step 2 he could do it. But then maybe we had to teach step 3, and once he had step 1 and 3, he could do the rest of them, right? So it wasn't necessary to teach all of the tasks in the analysis, but the ones that were creating the problem, if we taught those, that machine worked, right? So task analysis is a really important part of teaching a skill that's been difficult. The child didn't just absorb it on their own. Okay. Moving on to our question of the day. We always have a question for you that we enjoy your participation, especially on Facebook and Twitter when you answer the question of the day, because it helps us to know what's going on with you, helps us to define shows that we want to do in the future, questions that we ask our experts, and it's a great way for you to communicate with other people in the community if you're having something difficult going on. I love when you guys give support to each other, and I also love it when you guys talk about things. Maybe you say, for today our question is, where would you like to see more progress? And I see that sometimes maybe somebody will say, well, I'd like to see more progress with, this social skill. And then somebody else chimes in and says, oh, wow, that's amazing. That was where we were last year, and here's how we were able to circumvent that. Here's how we were able to work on that. So you lift each other up, you remind each other what's possible, and you remind yourselves that we're not in this alone, that other people are going through the same thing that you are. Yeah, everybody's got a little something different going on, but we're all in the same neighborhood, and that there's progress to be had. So we always have a topic of the day, a topic of the week, and our topic this entire week has been making progress, because for me, this is what it's all about, right? We can talk about all the difficult things that there are, and we could talk about all the controversies that there are, but at the end of the day, I think this is what we all want. We all want to make progress. Wherever our children are on the spectrum, whatever age they are, if you're an individual who's on the spectrum, you want to make progress. We all want to make progress. It doesn't matter whether we're on the spectrum or not. So setting that as the goal, and I've said it all week long, autism has taught me so much, but the thing that really resonates with me, that I've learned from autism that I really didn't get in the other areas of my life, is that by making those small incremental bits of progress, it massively adds up. It massively adds up. Very, very exciting. So we've got some wonderful things talking about progress today. Ooh, we've got some experts for you. So let's take a look at our schedule. We've got a funding tip coming up for you a little bit later on today because it's Friday. We try to get to a funding tip. And Real Progress with Dr. Adel. That's Dr. Adel Najdowski. She joins us on Fridays whenever we have the ability to have her on Fridays. And we're going to be talking with her today in just a few minutes, in fact, about making progress with teaching those receptive and expressive language skills. It can be very overwhelming if you're somebody who doesn't have a background. Well, I was just going to say if you don't have a background in education, but the truth is, even if you have a background in education, it can be overwhelming when your child doesn't just automatically soak these things up. Really makes a difference, though, when we target it and target it efficiently. And then a little bit later on in the program, we're going to be joined by Dr. Jonathan Tarbox to talk about some research. They just had an event that we were talking about last week on the show, and we'll be talking about what happened at that event and some research on making progress with our kids. Really stuff to look forward to. I think you're going to like sinking your teeth into it. We're going to take a break in just a second, but I want to remind you once again of some of the really exciting stuff happening here next week. So on Monday of next week, we're going to have Monica Holloway here with us, and I'm sure that a lot of you saw the clip on a lot of social media this last week about the little child with autism and the dog, and that they sort of rescued each other. So we're going to be talking with Monica Holloway about that and many other things. As you know, she is the author of the book Cowboy and Wills and has a teenage son on the spectrum and is quite the animal lover. So we're thrilled to have her on Monday. Then a little bit later on Monday, we're going to be joined by Lisa Ackerman from Talk About Curing Autism, TACA, a wonderful parent support group, really the biggest of its kind. They're getting ready to have their Real Help Now conference. That's on May 11th and 12th. And want to encourage you, if you're able to get to that, if you can get to the Southern California region, it's right by Disneyland. You can go to that, go to Disneyland for Mother's Day. Woohoo, right? You'll be around a bunch of amazing parents who are getting it done and supportive, and some really amazing speakers. And we have a huge, and did I say huge? I meant enormous surprise for Miss Ackerman on Monday. Somebody who's going to surprise her. I have to keep kind of a lid on it, but we have a tremendous surprise. I know you're going to find it really fun. So that's on Monday. On Tuesday, we're going to be airing that the segment that we did, the most recent segment with Temple Grandin, answering your questions. Emily, how many questions was it you said that we end up being able to ask? And these were all questions that you guys sent in, but it was upwards of 30, I think, somewhere in around there. That many questions that Temple Grandin is answering that you guys wrote in. So that's on Tuesday morning. And then on Wednesday, Dr. Doreen Grampachet is going to come in and break down the new DSM-5 criteria for autism. It's the thing we've all been waiting for. It's here. It's time to look at it. And you've got an expert, an unparalleled expert, who's going to answer your questions in real time. That's on Wednesday morning, not to be missed. All right. Very exciting. Beginning of next week. Crazy, crazy exciting. So you won't want to miss that. We're going to take a break. When we come back, speaking of exciting, Dr. Adel Najdowski is going to be joining us for Real Progress. Our topic is making progress. We're going to do real progress with Dr. Adel. So stick with us.
You say hi, we say hi. Let's get wild, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Lisa Ackerman with TACA. My guest here.
I am Jennifer Lucero with TACA.
TACA Mom is here in the house. Jeff saw on a TV commercial, they were making calzones, and he looked at me and goes, "Mom, please make me that." Wait a minute, yeah, calzone, you can't have calzone. He goes, "Well, you make me pizza. Why don't we call it a pizzone?" So we're going to do this ode to Jeff, pizzone. So I'm going to have Jen come on in.
All right.
You're in charge.
Ready.
We're going to add a little grapeseed oil, garlic, cut up chicken, finely cut up onion, and we're going to throw a little bit of basil. So we're going to just take about 5 minutes or so, saute up the chicken and all of the onions together. While Jen is slaving away at the stove, I'm going to make the pizza crust. A lot of gluten-free choices that you have out there for pizza crust. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the dry. Again, I'm using eggs. There are a lot of egg replacers on the TACA website. We have about a dozen different ways to replace eggs. So I'm going to go ahead and add my shortening. Calls for a little extra salt, which I'm going to put in here. And also add a little pepper. And we also have herbes de Provence that gives the crust a nice Italian flavor. Can't forget the apple cider vinegar, organic stuff ready to go. Yes, I have all my ingredients. We're ready to rock with this mixer. And don't be afraid of dough. Dough doesn't bite. So here's what we'll be working with to make the puzzone. I'm ready to go. Let's get this party started. So what we're going to do next is roll out the dough. I like to be rolling in the dough, but we're going to roll out the dough instead. So let's go ahead and get started here with that. So again, you see me using the parchment paper all the time. Love this stuff. It's basically unbleached, ready to go. It's just going to make life a lot easier on your rolling pin. You don't need to coat it or anything, which is a lot easier. But I swear I should buy that by the gross ton. So the puzzones, this basically makes 2 big puzzones. I'm going to take half of the dough and roll it out. Half of the other dough will be for the other puzzone that we're going to make in just a little bit. So you want to do, you're not making a pie crust, you're kind of making a long oval shape. So we're going to try to make a shape where I'm going to basically roll this over with all the yummy fillings. And so any combination or variation thereof. This sauce, just real simple, is organic crushed tomatoes. I've added a little bit of salt and pepper and herbes de Provence in that as well, which I love. I like extra fresh basil. That's always yummy to have on your puzzone. And thank you, this turned out fantastic. So we're just basically building it the way that we want to eat it. Of course, my favorite rice-free, organic, dairy-free, soy-free cheese. It's going to pop out the sides.
Okay.
I'm not afraid of popping out the sides. So that's the beauty of the parchment paper. Once you're done, you just flip it over and peel it back. So I'm just taking a fork now and going around the edges. It looks so pretty.
It looks really nice.
So for like 400 degrees, we're going to go for about 25 minutes. You want it golden brown. And because we cooked everything pretty much already, you're not worried about not having everything fully cooked. So look how cute those look.
Looks great.
Like those 4 happy people right there. This weighs a ton. So let's go to the magic oven. Pull out our finished product. And voila!
Good.
Oh my gosh,
looks
this
beautiful.
is so yummy. There's nothing better than a little Jeff Ackerman puzzone.
Yeah.
And this is going to be nuclear hot, but we'll go ahead and cut it
Careful.
open so you can. Oh my gosh, this is going to taste so good
That
later
looks
on for
great.
your kids.
Yum.
Feedback, keep it coming. Thank you for helping, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Come back to Autism Live. We'll keep doing allergy-friendly cooking classes. If you have any suggestions or things that you would like to see us make, bring it on. You can reach us at autismlive@gmail.com or Facebook.
Love the Facebook.
I know, too much for me. Facebook, so facebook.com/autismlive, or thousands of taco recipes ready to go. Basically go to Takanow, TACANOW.org, and we'll see you next time.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Our segment right now is called Real Progress with Dr. Adel. We're joined by Dr. Adel Najdowski. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
And you are the co-creator of Skills, a wonderful product that I talk about here on the show from time to time because I'm a big fan of Skills and a big fan of yours. So thrilled to have you here today. And I always like to remind people that I had, because I think people think that I know more than I actually know, but because I don't. Let's disavow that immediately. I was a mom who was having a child who was getting early intensive behavioral intervention, and I was learning little terms and things. But then I got the opportunity to get an hour a day with Dr. Najdowski where I could ask any question, and she could say, "You're off. You're off in the woods here," and steer me back and say, "This is what this means." So this is, if I have any intelligence about autism, it's because I had that hour with you for over 6 months.
I don't know if you remember, but that was my idea to do that hour a day.
Well, I was frightened in the beginning. I was really, really frightened, but I sort of wish that we could give everybody that hour. So
nice.
I'm
Thank you.
so thrilled to have you here with us for a period of time so that you all get access to Dr. Najdowski. It's not an hour a day, I realize that, but it's the closest I could work out for you.
The funniest thing is I always felt bad and felt like it should be a lot more time. I always felt like I wasn't giving you enough time.
Wow. Well, and you know, I would have taken more time, but you're a very busy lady and other people needed you and need you, and I get that. But thrilled to be able to share now with everybody. And I asked you to come in today. We've been talking about progress, and this is what we really focus on with you. And we were talking earlier in the week about receptive and expressive skills, language skills, and I really want to get your take on it because I gave them the jargon and explained it, but I think it's always beneficial to have an expert. So talk to us about those terms. Which one do you want to start with?
Okay, well, probably easiest just to start with receptive.
Okay.
I think the easiest way to think about receptive is as listener behavior. So thinking from the point of view of the child, who's the learner. And usually with a receptive, what you're doing is you're putting out objects and you're having the child listen and then respond based on what they hear. So it could be something like putting 3 objects out and saying, touch the apple, and then the child would reach over and touch the apple to indicate that they understood. So it's kind of like understanding or listening.
What they understand. And then expressive.
Okay, and then with expressive, this is just any behavior that the child engages in where they become the speaker instead of the listener.
Okay.
And to be a speaker doesn't mean they have to be using vocal speech. They could be using other methods as well, like sign language, picture exchange, or other devices.
Okay. So really important that we have that distinction because a lot of people, we all want for our children to be able to speak. Everybody wants that.
Right.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we get closer to that a little bit later on. But I want to go back to the expressive and the receptive because these are terms that get thrown around any meeting we're at. If we have a child on the spectrum, we hear those terms.
Okay.
People say, oh, expressive, we're working on this, receptive, da-da-da-da. But I think it's hard as a parent, and I certainly didn't understand anywhere near the beginning that your child's abilities in these 2 areas could be vastly different.
That's true.
And it could vastly impact their ability to learn and carry out things that you're trying to do.
Yeah, in typical child development, a lot of times mothers and fathers, when they're interacting with their infants and they're becoming now toddlers, they have objects and they're labeling them all the time.
Yeah.
So they're putting some sort of label onto them and they're pairing those 2 things together. And the child just naturally acquires these labels and they start using them expressively. And interchangeably, they'll understand, like if you're looking through a book and you say, which one's the apple, they'll point to it and everything. And so it just happens naturally and it doesn't have to be taught.
Right.
Or like if you teach the child in a book and you say, you know, apple, and you point to it, then later you can ask them to touch it and they'll be able to do it.
Right.
So it kind of like the 2 things, you can maybe teach one and they automatically acquire the other.
Yeah.
Without direct teaching. And so one mistake sometimes people make is that they think that when they're working with children with autism, that they maybe can teach one and then the other one's just assumed.
Right.
So let's say, for example, I'm teaching receptive and I ask the child to touch apple. I don't think many people do this, but they might assume now that the child knows what apple is, and so when we're in conversation, they're just going to use the word apple.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things that comes under the heading, you know, now that I understand how language is acquired for neurotypical children, it seems miraculous to me.
It is, isn't it?
It's like a really amazing miracle, a magic trick. It's something, it's just like, how does that happen?
Right.
And we take it for granted with neurotypical children. You just kind of skim over that and it just happens. For our kids on the spectrum, maybe sometimes it's happening and then for whatever reason it stops and it gets stuck in one place or it never develops.
Right.
But either way, it's disheartening. There's an emotional component to it where it can cause fear, it can cause panic, it can cause despondency. And the main thing that we want to make sure everybody knows is you can teach it.
Yeah, yeah.
Really, really important. And when you break it down into the 2 things, the expressive and the receptive, then you're more likely to be successful in teaching these skills.
I'm wondering if we could have Emily show the slide that I sent her, because I think this really depicts it nicely. So on the top, we're looking at receptive. So basically, let's say a teacher says, touch apple. So the child hears the word apple, and then they select or they touch an actual apple or a picture of an apple.
Okay.
Now, the exact opposite of that would be expressive, and we refer to this as a tact, where they see the apple and then now they say the word apple.
Right.
So what's interesting is that if you think about this, if you could teach one direction, like the receptive direction, and automatically get the opposite direction, that's considered derived symmetry. And children of typical development will do this a lot of times automatically. You can teach either the receptive or the tact, and they derive the other one without direct training.
Okay.
But children with autism have been found not to do that.
Yeah.
So we can't just teach the meaning of the words. We can't just say, touch apple, and then the child touches it, and now because they're vocal, we assume, okay, they've learned the meaning of apple, and they know what it is.
Right.
So when they're engaged in conversation and they're being expressive, they're going to start using the word apple. It's really bizarre, but they have to actually be taught both directions.
Right.
So what a lot of people will do is they'll teach, like when they're introducing, let's say, apple, for example, they might teach the receptive, and then they'll test to see if they derive the expressive, and if they don't, then they'll teach the expressive.
Okay.
And then they'll bring in the next item, something other than an apple, now a ball, and they'll do that same process over and over. What's really cool is that kids start to begin to learn to derive the relation over time after many different targets and examples have been taught.
I've seen that with my child. When I think about all the terms that we have not taught to him that he has picked up over time, there was just a period of time when all of a sudden he became a sponge. You guys had taught him how to learn. But before that, I always use the expression that he was like a dry erase board. You'd put something on it, and then a wind would come and it would be gone.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But you guys taught him how to learn.
Right.
It was very painstaking, but it was possible. I think we should take a short break and then come back and talk about some of the techniques that you use to teach receptive skills and to strengthen those, and to teach expressive, and how a parent could know for themselves where their child is in terms of those two skills, because you've got some really good information about that. So let's take a short break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Adel Najdowski.
My name is Rocky.
Autism used to affect 1 in every 10,000 children. Now it affects 1 in every 91 kids.
TACA is one of 5 organizations helping families living with autism today.
Our kids came back to life. There's a whole community out there, and now we're a part of it.
Oh, TACA has a place for me.
To find TACA, go to www.tacanow.org.
Please.
Welcome back. That was Lisa Ackerman. She's the target for our big surprise on Monday. You're not going to want to miss that. She looks like somebody, I know Lisa quite well now, and she's somebody who'll do really well with a surprise. So don't miss that on Monday in the 11 o'clock hour. But right now, we have Dr. Adel Najdowski. We call this segment Real Progress with Dr. Adel. We're talking about receptive and expressive skills, language skills, and how we acquire them. We just went through a definition of what the two are, so that we begin to understand that these are two different skill areas. And I had said to you earlier that I don't think that I understood until my son was quite into autism that it was possible for these skill areas to be different, to be a strength and a weakness.
Right.
I assumed they were on the same plane, but they weren't.
No.
And it really made a difference in how my son was taught. How can a parent begin to know where their child is on expressive and receptive skills?
Well, we actually, within the skills program, have a very comprehensive assessment, and our entire language curriculum is actually subdivided by the different types of language, by functions of language. So we have a receptive category. We don't just have an expressive category. We don't call it expressive because there's even different functions of expressive.
Yeah.
So a child could be imitating someone else's speech. That would be considered one function. They could be labeling something in their environment, like they see something and label it. That's another one. Or they could be engaging in some sort of conversation, like someone says something and then they respond to what they say.
Right.
That's another one. So all of these things are subdivided, and in the assessment you can kind of get an idea of where the child's weaknesses are and where their strengths are, so that you know what you need to target.
Quite honestly, the first time I was able to look at a graph and see, okay, this is where my child's expressive and receptive were after I took the assessment for skills. That's the first time I got to see a graphic representation of it, and it made me very happy. I was always asking and saying, can I get a snapshot of where we're at? Because I'm a big visual person, and I want to know, how far do we have to go? Like, we used the expression this morning, pack the tartar sauce. We're going after Moby Dick. What do I need to, like, I need to gear myself up to be ready. How far behind are we? That's a parent question we ask all the time. How far behind are we?
Yep.
Because then you know what you got to do.
Exactly.
So, and then there is something to be done. How do we actually teach receptive and expressive skills?
Well, with receptive skills, it's a matter of, luckily, it's listening behavior, so you can actually provide assistance to the child and gently guide them to the correct responses. So that array of items, you say touch apple, then you can take the child's hand and actually put it on the apple.
Right.
And you can start with just an apple on the table if you need to and not have anything else. To make it very clear that when I say apple, I'm talking about this.
Yes.
And then slowly bring in other things on the table and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you need to get to the point where you're not just asking only for apple, and that you're also randomly interspersing other things like touch the ball or whatever else that you've been working on, so that you know that they're actually attending to the word you're saying, and it's not just, oh, every time I put my hand on this thing, I get a reward.
Yeah, and I was saying to you earlier that sometimes we just go, well, they didn't pick it up. So does that mean it's not teachable? And I know I was guilty of this in the beginning, that I would see a video of somebody saying, touch the car, and you see the child touch the car, and you go, okay, but if my child could do that when you say touch the car, then I wouldn't be asking the question, right? It's that sort of, catch-22. But what's left out of that video is the whole process, and you guys see this sometimes on the A word, that the first thing that they'll do is put the car down and they say touch the car, and as you said, they do a physical prompt and have the child touch the car, and they go, yay, that's the car, good job touching the car. So that very quickly the child goes, in the beginning they're just responding to the reinforcement and go, you get happy when I do that. I don't know why I'm doing it, but it's amazing to watch that moment when they do get it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the car. Oh, and you want me to touch it. And you see the lights come on.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing to see. It is possible to teach it.
Right.
But you guys are so patient. And there are steps, and you guys are skilled at it. But as parents, we can get that skilled at it and learn that level of patience and follow in your footsteps with, here's the progression of how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And the lessons are there.
And for parents who want to learn how to do that, how to do that assisting of the child, and how do you get to the point where you're not assisting them, because we don't want them to just be prompt dependent. They have to learn to be independent.
Right.
There's trainings on all this, and it's within the Institute for Behavioral Training e-learning library. Right. So parents can go there to ibehavioraltraining.com and check those out. And there's plenty of videos and other things showing people doing it with children, so you can see what it looks like.
But within skills, too, you get all the lessons. You take the assessment and you get all the lessons, and they have teaching tips with the lessons, too, that are fabulous.
Yeah.
I love
But once you learn that standard set of procedures of how to prompt the child to touch it and how you fade that prompt out and get them to the point of being independent, you can use those strategies across all receptive tasks.
Yes.
Across anything like that that's considered listener behavior.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily write that out in skills for every single lesson, because it would be really redundant.
Yes.
So that's where the Institute for Behavioral Training e-learning modules really come in.
Thank you for that. And so same sort of thing with expressive. We talked about, chunking it down into these small moments with the receptive. Same sort of thing with the expressive?
Well, with expressive, I can't force a word out of a child's mouth.
Yeah.
If they're using a picture icon or a sign language, I can, because I can prompt them through that. But if we're going to be using speech, we have to do something different. And so there's some research that's been done out there. There's this procedure for children who are not speaking right now, or maybe they make sounds, or they might say certain words, but they don't do anything in response to something you're doing. Okay. Then you can use this procedure. It's called stimulus pairing. It really doesn't matter what it's called, though. Just listen to this.
But we love jargon. Now
you make a sound and then you pair it with a reinforcer. So you have to make sure you're using something that is a reinforcer for them. It might need to be food or something like that, or a very favorite toy or whatever. So let's say they love bubbles. Okay. So what I would do is I would blow bubbles, and simultaneously I would say something like buh, buh, and then I would blow bubbles.
Okay.
And so they're getting a reinforcer paired with that speech. Now, the way what this really comes from, if you think about it, is think of moms with their babies.
Yeah.
What are they doing? They're holding their babies, they're caressing their babies, they're feeding their babies, all the while they're talking to their babies.
Yeah.
So what are they doing? They're pairing speech with these reinforcers.
Yeah.
Now, kids with autism, those aren't reinforcers. That's why they're not developing language, because they don't necessarily like to be touched and those kind of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it never develops. Whereas with a non-autistic child, they start babbling all the time. They're hanging out in their cribs by themselves, and they're babbling and cooing and making sounds because the sounds are themselves automatically reinforcing because they've been paired with so much of this other reinforcement they get from their parents rocking them and feeding them and everything else.
Yeah.
So what we do instead, since kids with autism don't necessarily find those things as reinforcing, we find what does work for them as a reinforcer. In this case, bubbles, food, whatever, right? Objects.
Right.
We pair the objects with the sounds the same way we would if we had a baby.
Yeah.
So then what happens is the children start making sounds. It's really weird, but it happens.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they're making sounds, now you deliver the reinforcer right after they make the sound.
Right.
So that they learn, oh, every time I make sounds, I get this bubble. And then we're increasing the amount of sounds. And we don't really care what they're saying. Anything is fine initially. We're just trying to increase the amount of babble and whatnot going on. You look like you have a question.
You know what? I had an epiphany because, you know, we all talk about how we come to autism and we're in different places at different times. And I know when there are moms who will come up to me and say, now, you know, where was your child in terms of language? Because we're all comparing and saying, is my child like your child? And my child regressed into autism. So, and it was interesting because he was always incredibly noisy. Sounds were a big thing to him.
Right.
And he was always very into touch, too. But so he found that all very reinforcing. And when I would make noises to him back, but he didn't get to the next phase that you're talking about pairing that this goes together. So we didn't have to spend a whole lot of time on getting him to babble and make noise. He already found that reinforcing. Okay. But I'm always looking at it about, like, so where do you enter? The assessment is good for that. Where do you enter and where do we start from? So you just described a point that people start when they're not making noises that I didn't experience.
Right.
So I just had that epiphany. I was like, gosh, we didn't go through that because he did find touch reinforcing.
Yeah.
But so you just reminded me of something that I didn't start at the very beginning. We were a little bit lucky that he thought that sound was a great thing.
Okay.
Still thinks sound is a great thing.
Okay, great.
But so we came in right at the point that you're talking about now, that trying to make it productive.
Right.
Yeah.
So then what you do is you take your powerful reinforcers and you start saying something like, say, bah.
Yeah.
And anything they say, even if it sounds nothing like bah, initially they get the bubbles or the reinforcer. We just need them to get the click or the light to come on that says, oh, okay, cool. When I say something, I get something.
Yeah.
And when I say something, when they tell me to say something, I get something. Because we have to get that too.
Yes.
Okay? And so as soon as they're reliably saying a sound, whenever you tell them say, ba, or whatever the sound is you're asking for, and you've provided the reinforcer, and you can now get that reliably, they do it every time, then we shape the sound. So now they're not going to get the reinforcer anymore. For any sound that they make, they're going to have to say something that's at least an approximation of ba.
Right.
You know, some sounds might be harder than others, and within the skills program, there's actually handouts that show how sounds develop in typical development, like what the easier sounds are and those kind of things.
Yeah, because you don't want to be trying to teach a 3-year-old who hasn't been speaking a sound that really doesn't come into full swing until they're a 4-year-old for a neurotypical child.
Right.
So I remember having an issue with that I was working on something, and the SLP, the speech and language pathologist, said, that comes later. Let's work on the things that he's behind on.
Right.
And that might be there later on.
So what you're starting to do now is you're starting to develop this echoic repertoire. Echoic just means they're echoing you. So you say something like, say, and then the child says, and then they get the reinforcer.
Cool.
And what you would do is teach as many of the sounds that are age appropriate. And then from there, you would go to blends. And probably, something like, say, ma. So M-A, ma, right? Yeah. And then once they can do blends, you go to chains. So you could do like a chain where you're using the same sound twice, like say ma.
Right.
Or you could do a chain like baby, okay?
Right.
And once they're done with chains, then you go to just words like hat, cat, whatever. And then from there, you go to phrases and sentences.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because we all have to get over that emotional hump of thinking that it was just going to happen.
No, it's not going to just happen.
It doesn't just happen. However, if you go through and go back and pick up the thread where you need to, and that's going to be different for different people, right? You might need to go, because you mentioned, if your child has no verbalization, that we want to start, pairing the stimulus pairing, but figure out where you need to plug in, where your child seems to be stuck, and then you work forward and you make progress.
Yeah, and one of the good things to do when you're trying to develop a child's vocal language is to use things that are reinforcing for them. So basically, it's kind of like they're actually requesting it.
Yeah.
Because if I just want to teach a bunch of sounds, I can do that. But it would be better if I knew everything they love and I had all those things available, and then I taught them sounds that were age appropriate, that were like an approximation for asking for that item.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the buff or bubbles, instead of maybe doing t and then giving bubbles. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Because we're using the child's motivation for the things they really want, and we're kind of almost simultaneously teaching them to start making requests as well.
Yes.
Because both of those two things kind of come in at the same time, and you can really use the child's motivation for things they want to your advantage when you're teaching the different sounds and stuff like that. So you might want to choose things basically that the words and the sounds and the things you decide to work on might be best suited to be things that are related to reinforcers for the child initially.
Yeah, because that's really key here, is that it's got to be, we have to make it reinforcing. If we have to pile extra stuff on top, but it has to be worth their while.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's difficult for them. They're not going to do it. When I think about the things that are difficult for me that I don't want to do and that I avoid and don't really want to get better at unless there's a reason, right? Same thing for our kids. So it is painstaking, but there are all different ways that we can get help and support. And obviously, if you're working with an ABA provider, they will be working on these things with your child, but you have to uphold them when the ABA provider leaves. Right. And that's key. And of course, there's skills, and you mentioned Institute for Behavioral Training, that all these things together, we can target this behavior. There was a study that we covered on the show not too long ago, it was about a month ago, talking about kids who aren't speaking and how likely, if they're given the right therapies, I know it's the fear of every autism parent that has a child who isn't speaking. Oh my gosh. And there are children that don't acquire vocal language. That happens. That's a percentage of kids, but the statistics have shown us that overwhelmingly the children who get these kinds of therapies will gain spoken language.
Yeah. I've worked with some children who didn't start their ABA program till they're 4, and they were not vocal at all. If anything, they walked around just making stereotypical noises, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And mom and dad didn't even necessarily think their child could ever speak, and within 3 to 5 weeks, we were able to get them speaking. So, and that's like
amazing.
Unbelievable breakthrough, but this stuff just works.
Yes, it does work. It's been shown time and time again to work. Well, thrilling, because it's progress.
Yeah.
Progress is the name of the game. Thrilling. Wonderful. I thank you so much for being here with us. And for, were we going to answer a question, or are we getting you back to work?
We can answer a skills question.
Okay, let's take a short break then and come back, and if we've got a skills question, let's do it. So stick with us. Dr. Najdowski is going to answer, because from time to time you guys send us in questions for skills, we refer them to her, and when they're particularly something that would help a lot of people, then we ask her to cover it here on the show. So stick with us.
Hi, I'm Bryce Myler, and I'm the Contracts Director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I've been here for about 5 years. CARD has several employees with many years of insurance experience, dealing with insurance, dealing with pre-authorizations, dealing with discovering whether there's coverage or not. So we have more experience than any ABA provider that I've ever come across. So for a prospective client, somebody that may be interested in, ABA therapy and what CARD has to offer, we have a special 800 number, and you call that number. They will talk to you about what we have to offer, how ABA works. He'll ask you for the front and back of your ID card, and then we check to see if you do or do not have coverage. If you have coverage for ABA therapy, we try to do whatever we can to set it up where we can bill for you, and you don't have to fight with the insurance company every month to get your claims paid. For California residents, we recently did a series of insurance trainings all over the state, and you can click on the link below to watch pretty much the full presentation. It has a lot of information, how you can get your insurance company to comply with what they're supposed to do, understanding the networks, and many other valuable pieces of information.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Our very special guest here in the studio with us is Dr. Adel Najdowski, and we ask her from time to time, because she is the co-creator of Skills, that when those of you who are using Skills write in questions, and if it's something that makes sense for everybody to hear about, that we ask you to address it here on the show. We had a question come in about how was Skills created? Why was it created?
Yeah, I think this is a fun one to answer because it gives a little bit of the backstory of Skills and how we came to the point that we're at right now. Skills was created by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and it involved a lot of people, like an army actually, to get it to happen. And the way it kind of got started was that the executive director and founder of CARD, Doreen Grampiche, for several years and still going, was constantly traveling and going to conferences and giving presentations and meeting lots of parents. And a lot of these parents would line up after her presentation and wait an hour or two to talk to her because they were so concerned about their children and they really wanted services. And a lot of them lived in areas where there were no services. There were no BCBAs. And they were trying to do their best to figure out what they can do for their child and to piece some sort of program together.
Yeah, like a lot of you out there. I mean, this story sounds familiar, right?
Right. So actually, I started working for CARD in 2005, and I remember shortly after that I was in a meeting with Doreen, and she didn't look very well that day, and I asked her, "What's wrong?" And she said, I'm just feeling really sick right now because I'm having dreams every night about these families that don't have any services, and every day that's ticking by and they still don't have services and their kids are getting older, and we just can't provide all the services that I want to provide. We can't open up offices fast enough. We can't get BCBAs fast enough, and I just worry for them, and I want to provide them with something that will help them to work on using ABA with their kids. So I want to take our curriculum and I want to finish developing it, and I want to put it out to the public. And so that day I actually said, okay, well, I'm willing to give up everything else I do right now and work on this 100% of my time if that's something you want me to do. And she just was like, yes, please do that. And then she started funneling me tons of staff. At one point we had 12 full-time people working on it. And she said, how long do you think it's going to take to make? And I said, like a year. It ended up taking more like 4 years, and then another year of getting it online, because then we decided this should be a technology that's online so that it can be accessed anywhere by anyone of the entire team of a child and things like that. But the initial goal was, let's figure out a way to help these families. But in producing it, we kind of struggled a little with, like, how do we do this? Do we take everything we've already done and put it in, like, everyday fluffy language for families and make it more like, I don't know, a guide or something like that, but not so specific? Or do we put out what we use here internally? And we kind of went back and forth with that, and we finally decided, let's put out what we use internally, but let's add a lot of things that will help make it more user-friendly, like examples that are in layman's terms, and videos so they could see exactly what it is. And then that way we're kind of teaching them what we do, and they'll be able to keep up with the lingo when they're in IEP meetings, and they'll be able to understand their ABA therapist if they ever do get one. But yet the two things kind of end up working well together. You start to learn the language if you're learning the layman portion of it that goes along with it. And so because we also figured that other ABA service providers would probably benefit from it. And we also figured that school districts could benefit from it. So it finally launched in March of 2011, and here we are now. So so far so good, and it's been a long ride and very, very well worth it.
Yeah, and what I think is particularly interesting is how people are using it in so many different ways. I love to talk, I love to talk about skills here because I use it in my way. And I know that some of you write in and say you use it, for different things. There's so many components to it. There's so many ways to use it. A teacher can use it. An ABA provider can use it. A parent can use it. Excuse me. It just has so many different ways that it functions. It's really quite amazing. And we always like to remind everybody that you can check it out. There is a free trial that's available.
Right, yeah.
So you can go to skillsforautism.com,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And check it out. There are 2 different types of trials that you can do. Whether you want to give your credit card or not, there's a way that you can make that work. Either way, you just get access to more things.
Right.
If you you know how that works with things like that. You give your credit card number and they tell you you have 14 days to decide. On the 15th day, your credit card will be charged, and then that way you have access to the entire thing.
And if you don't feel comfortable with that, then there's also this other option, which is called Skills Lite. And if you click on that, you get to see certain portions of the system, but not the entire thing.
But you'll get a good look at, you'll be able to see, to know how you can use this. And if you're not sure, if you're a parent out there not sure how you would use this, please write me. Let's talk, because I think it's an amazing thing. And I thank you for all your service because that's the thing that kept me awake at night too, was my child had access to all these things. And what if I had lived someplace else? Would he have just been left out? And we see that all the time. And this is a way that anybody who has an internet connection does not have to be left out. There is a cost for doing skills. It's incredibly reasonable, but I know that that's out of reach for some families still, which is why Autism Care and Treatment Today loves to give grants for it. So no one should be left out. There's ACT Today. They're getting ready to do a grant phase again. No one should be left out.
Right.
So check it out. And we thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. You too.
And we'll see you back, not next week. We're not doing a live show on next Friday.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a break, and we're going to go right to the A Word. This is the ongoing documentary that's being made here by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. He's about a year into his early intervention, and in this particular episode, you see a new therapist coming into his world. She is doing what they call an overlap with a more experienced therapist, so that you can see how a new therapist is trained and see what a benefit that is to the child, that it doesn't put them in any detriment. But take a look. I love this because we get to see that the new therapist, while she has some skills, there's some things she's not getting right. And very nicely, the older senior therapist is addressing things. It makes it easier for all of us to understand that we're going to make mistakes too. So take a look. This is the A Word.
Whoa, happy feet there. Are you excited? Wow. Can I have a kiss? Thank you. He did tell Miss Miriam yesterday that he said poopies. She came and got me. We looked, there was none there, so we thought he was telling us stories. And 2 minutes later, there were.
Oh.
Wow. You did it, didn't you?
That's exciting.
She's always a new therapist and is having an overlap with Jessica. She will be doing fieldwork training until she is ready to independently work with a child. In order for She's Away to work independently, she must first pass a theory-based test, which is her knowledge of autism, and then second, she must pass a field evaluation, which is an overlap where she applies what she has learned.
If I want to do actions, then it looks like we're just doing maintenance right now.
Do the ones that he already has mastered.
And that's in a separate bag. Okay.
Yeah. And then you would just be asking, what is the little boy doing? The boy is playing.
Okay.
It should be his answer.
Okay. Jack Riley, my name is She's Away.
Hi, She's Away.
Hi, She's Away.
Oh, very good. Give me a high five. Yeah. Okay, so, Jack, what would you like to do after we do a program? Would you like bubbles?
Puzzle.
Oh, puzzle? Okay, we can do puzzle.
Since we're using the puzzle as a reinforcer, don't give it to him yet
right.
until you do the program. Because now he's like, well, I already got the puzzle,
yeah,
so
why should I?
Why should
Okay.
it work?
What is the boy doing?
He's sitting.
Yeah! Oh, good! sticker. What is this man doing? Yeah. What is she doing? Yeah.
Good job.
What is he doing?
He's spider positive.
Yeah, that was great.
So bring up some other ones.
Spider.
What are they doing?
She's hugging.
Yes, they're hugging.
Are you taking data as you're going along?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is he doing?
He's sleeping.
Oh, yeah, you're so good.
He's sleeping.
So make sure you write the
The
stimuli, too.
yeah. It's like, I don't want to take too much time. Should I just be quick with it?
Yeah.
Okay. What are they doing?
He's playing.
Yeah, they're playing. Good job, Jack.
Playing blocks.
They are playing blocks. You're so smart.
What is he doing?
He's playing.
Yeah, another one.
He's playing blocks.
He's playing blocks too.
He's playing cars.
He's playing cars. That's right.
What is she doing?
He's playing.
Yeah. What are they doing?
He's playing.
Yeah, you finished. Good job, Jack Riley. Give me high fives. Can you do high fives? Yes. Okay. You ready to play with your puzzle? Okay, here.
Where's the cow? Where's the cow? Oh, good job. What does he say? What does the cow say? What is he?
Moo.
Hi, monkey. You want a pillow sandwich? Okay, go get me the pillows. Will you show She's the way how we do your pillow sandwich?
I want to see this pillow sandwich.
Okay, ready? One. Hold on. Can you let go? Hold on. 1, 2, 3. Ah! Squash! Pillow sandwich. It's a pillow sandwich. And here we get there's a lot of opportunities for him to ask for things. Like if he wants more of jumping, more of pillow sandwiches. It's called man training.
Oh.
So what we're doing is we're giving him frames because he knows that I want and give me.
Mm-hmm.
But we're trying to teach him a new frame, which is can I have something. So how we prompt him is something that he really, really wants, like, pillow sandwiches or having you pick him up or something.
Okay.
And I've been prompting him with a partial verbal with just the cup, and he knows to say, can I have?
Okay.
So, we could track that later, but this is just one of the opportunities that you can use to to do that program. Do you want more? Then you say, can I? Yes, you can have pillow sandwich. Come here. Crash! After say can.
Okay, come here. Let me see you. Oh, how fun is that?
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here with the wonderful Dr. Jonathan Tarbox.
Good to be here.
You're the head of research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and you're also the director for the Autism Research Group.
Correct. Yep.
And you just had a huge event for the Autism Research Group. Tell us what it was, where it was, and how it was.
Right. So we at Autism Research Group just held a one-day, all-day workshop in San Diego, California, and the target of the workshop, or the focus of the workshop, was on teaching children with autism perspective taking and executive function skills.
Yes.
And it was a great success. It was completely sold out. It was oversold, actually. And we got a lot of really good feedback. People seemed to enjoy it, and everybody had a great time.
Really wonderful. And there were several different speakers. You were one of them,
That's correct.
What
Yep.
did you speak on?
So let's see what I talked about. I talked about recent research that our group has been doing on teaching executive function skills. So things like shifting attention to socially appropriate stimuli, things like rule acquisition, like understanding what's going on in your environment, cause and effect relationships in your environment, working memory, various sort of higher functioning skills like that.
Okay. And so this whole workshop was geared more towards kids who are a little bit older,
That's right.
on the higher end of the spectrum,
Right.
and really those kinds of skills that can make such a difference in terms of how they're functioning in the rest of the world.
That's right, yeah. So
really remarkable.
So ABA is really well known for teaching all of the basic skills, like things like labeling objects, asking for stuff when you want it, decreasing challenging behaviors, toileting, basic conversational and play skills, and all of that stuff is critical, but that's sort of like the fundamental building blocks. And then once you've sort of got all of that built up, then it's time to sort of figure figure out how do you put all this together and actually make it work in a day-to-day social or vocational or educational setting. And so that's more what the executive function skills are about.
And I have to say, particularly poignant to me, because so many parents talk about, if they've got older kids, they say, oh, you know, we did ABA when they were older, but right now we're having difficulty with him in a school setting because the way he's reacting to his peers, or he just doesn't seem to be able to get his homework done. He's not, you know,
he's
having
forgetting everything all the time.
His bag is a mess. Right. And I'm always saying, gee, have you done ABA? Yeah, we did that years ago, as if it was something you only do with 3-year-olds.
Right.
But when you have a 17-year-old who isn't able to achieve their goals, ABA is over and done with.
Right.
When in fact, you know, and they're asking for services, those same parents, and saying, why are our kids left out? Why are there no services for our kids? And even we saw this week in the state of Texas, they lifted their age requirement for insurance covering autism.
That's fantastic.
So there is no age in Texas, which is not necessarily the state that goes, hey, let's be first at doing what's, you know, going to be great for autism, took a big step forward. And so for those parents, I think here is something awesome that you can do that would make life easier, more productive, and help your young adult to be able to achieve more goals.
Absolutely.
And you not only then talked about the research, but I know it was on the schedule for you to give practical applications so that people would know how to teach these things.
Right. And so the primary audience for the workshop was board-certified behavior analysts and who are both researchers but for the most part, clinicians. So as you say, the main purpose of the workshop was to teach clinicians, BCBAs, about this type of ABA therapy and how to actually do it with their kids. And so, probably about 50 to 75% of the workshop was spent giving practical examples, showing video clips, running through lessons and curricula. You know, here's how to break this skill down into teachable units. Here's how to teach it to make sure that you get generalization in the natural environment, and, you know, all that sort of stuff.
I wish I could have been there.
Well, next time you should come.
Next time I got to put that on my schedule.
Live.
Yes, but then I'll have to be interviewing people. I want to sit there with a pad and a pen.
Great,
is how I want to attend.
You'll get in for free.
Okay, that's a deal. Because that's the kind of stuff it's really, you know, where I am with my child, and it's juicy kind of stuff. It's interesting to me because you guys have been doing this for a long, long time, and by you guys I mean the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. But it's still within the ABA community considered a little bit cutting edge, right?
It is cutting edge, yeah. And so, you know, everyone in the ABA community gets the general idea that the principles of learning and motivation that come from ABA should be applicable to everything everybody does, right? I mean, you know, the saying is, you know, we're basically all rats, pigeons, dolphins, monkeys. You know, we're basically all the same in terms of the same basic principles apply to all of us. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to use an ABA approach to teach even the most complex skills.
Right.
And yet there has been less work in those areas, and so it is somewhat cutting edge. But overwhelmingly, the response from the ABA community is positive.
Sure.
And folks are excited to see something new and innovative, and see something a little bit edgy and a little bit more complex and a little bit funky. Like, we're not 100% sure what we're doing. You know, like, you know, teaching a kid to self-monitor, plan, problem solve, and keep everything sort of on track all at the same time in their environment is a lot different from teaching a kid to say, this is a pen.
Exactly.
Right? It's not the same. It's a lot more complex, but it's fun.
Very, very fun. And you're having success with it. We should make sure that we say that, you know, and there's research to show that this approach is working.
That's right.
So it's not newfangled. It's working. Okay, great. And we're going to also today, we're going to take a little bit of a break, but then we're going to ask Dr. Tarbox, because it is still IEP season, and our entire topic this week was about making progress. And I know sometimes you guys want to know, why is something being done? What's the research that shows that this is effective? So, and especially in light of what you just said, and in light of the fact that more and more insurance is covering ABA and it's going to cover it later, we want to talk about what does the research show? How do you make progress? And some different studies that Dr. Tarbox can tell us about that you may want to use in an IEP.
Absolutely.
And you'll also tell us about how we can get access to the studies, which that's awesome. So we're going to take a short break and be back more with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox after these messages.
Hi guys, welcome back. For the month of May, I thought it'd be really neat if we made our own bird feeders. What's cool about it is once it's done and it's hung in your front yard, backyard, balcony, or whatever outdoor area that you have, your kids will be able to observe the bird feeder and tap when they see birds coming over and feeding from it. Like, oh my gosh, oh, so exciting. Do you see that? Sorry, I got distracted. I'm just so excited about all the different birds I've been seeing now that I have a bird feeder hanging outside. Anywho, let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are 2.5 cups of birdseed, half a cup of boiling water, 2 packets of unflavored gelatin, a spatula, twine, scissors, wax paper, and cookie cutters. Alright, now that I got your materials, it's super easy. I have my boiling hot half cup of water, and I'm going to take my 2 packets of unflavored gelatin, and I'm going to pour them in and stir it. The reason I pour it in the water first all by itself is to make sure that the gelatin dilutes really well, and I can stir it up real nicely. Now that it's been all stirred together, I'm going to take this liquid and pour it into the birdseed, making sure to scrape up all the gelatin that we diluted. Now I'm just going to stir it all up. Okay, now that this is all mixed up, I'm going to take my wax paper and put it on my table, just so I don't make a mess. And then I'm going to take my cookie cutter and lay it down. I'm also going to take a piece of string and cut it, about 6 inches long. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the cookie cutter halfway full with our birdseed mixture. And I'm going to take my string, fold it in half, I'm going to place it in the center. This way you can hang this up once it's done and dry. Now that it's full, I'm just going to pack it in. So now that this is all compacted, it's going to take about 6 hours for the gelatin to get completely hard. If you take it out too soon, the whole thing's going to fall apart. So let's wait a little bit, and I'll see you guys in a few moments. All right, it's been 6 hours now, so let's see if this little guy worked out. So I'm just going to pull him up and pop him out, okay? And here's my finished bird feeder. All you have to do now is hang it outside and wait for all the great things you're gonna see. Like, oh, I see another bird. This is so exciting. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the activity and keep me up to date with all the different birds that you and your child see outside your property. Until next time, craft on. Bye, guys.
Can you see me? Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live. Our very special guest is Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He's the head of research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And we wanted to talk with you. We usually talk on Fridays with you about research and get your opinions about new research. But this week we've been talking about making progress, and I think it's great to revisit from time to time about what the research says about making progress for kids with autism. Because as you and I have talked about many times, as hard as we work on autism awareness, there is still a great deal of misinformation that's out there, and a lot of people that are hearing the diagnosis and going game over instead of game on. Right? Not my phrase.
Like that.
Lisa
great.
Ackerman from TACA says
That's
that.
Good, yeah.
So I have to give her credit. Game over is not the thing, it's game on.
It's not in our vocabulary.
It isn't. It is not. So where do you want to start in terms of research with, I was talking before about how a lot of times people will say, well, I know ABA works for some kids,
right,
but it doesn't work for everybody. And, if they're not making substantive progress, and this just makes me really, really angry. I used some words earlier that we're not going to use on the live broadcast, right? Okay. Because it makes me mad. Because what is substantive progress to somebody? Because I think it's different when it's in your home.
So there's a lot of different issues or variables that all sort of impact this issue of progress. I don't even know where to start. There's so many. Actually, maybe one place to start is in quality.
Okay.
So it's true that if you do something poorly, it's not going to work, right? So if you go to a lousy mechanic, they might not fix their car. It might take them 10 times as long to fix your car, right? Same thing with ABA. If you have a lousy ABA provider, your child might not be making very much progress. I mean, I've seen that plenty of times. I've certainly seen that in the school districts also. A lot of times school districts attempt to set up their own ABA program by hiring maybe one BCBA to oversee 100 children. And that's, you know, they may as well not even bother, right? It's like a joke, essentially, in terms of quality. But same thing with private ABA providers too. If they don't have proper training and supervision and experience for the therapists and their supervisors, then you know the quality can be pretty low. So that could be one reason why maybe your child actually isn't making very much progress.
Okay.
But let me say this: every single child with autism, when they're put in a good quality ABA program, learns.
Yes.
Every single child with autism makes progress when they're in a good quality ABA program. There's no exceptions to that. So, I mean, literally 0 exceptions to that.
And you know, you could come in and say that to me every day and it would still make me happy. Because I need for people to understand that there's so many people who don't get that.
Right. And essentially when people say, well, maybe ABA isn't working for this child, or this child can't make progress or can't learn. Essentially, what they're saying is that this human being is not capable of learning. I mean, it's crazy.
Right.
I mean, we, you know, on the most extreme ends of the spectrum, you know, we've had success toilet training a 65-year-old man with profound intellectual disabilities and autism, who had no eyes, no functional means of communication, wouldn't even wear clothing. I mean, you know, in the most challenging possible circumstance you can imagine, you're going to see progress. And what that progress might look like is now he goes to the bathroom in the toilet rather than in his diaper.
Right.
Now he can do a basic piece of sign language to get food when he's hungry.
Right.
Now he can, you know, ask for attention by touching you on the shoulder rather than hitting you. Okay.
Right. And that is huge.
It's huge.
That's huge. And so when people talk about, well, you know, all kids don't make progress, I think that is a disservice to ABA and a disservice to our kids.
Well,
more importantly,
it's a disservice to everyone with autism. I mean, it's frankly, I mean, I would almost say it's prejudice. It's almost a form of discrimination. Like you're basically saying this person is mentally defective is essentially what it comes down to. No one's going to put it in those words, but let's just be honest. If a person can't learn under the most optimal learning circumstances, if you're suggesting that, you're saying, they just can't learn. Might as well give up.
Hopeless.
And that's simply not the case.
Right. Not the case. But once we see that kids make progress, the progress looks different for all kids.
Absolutely.
You know, that's the part where I think people get a little bit confused. There's no written guarantee that if you do this, here is the exact outcome that you will get.
And frankly, I would say that exactly the same thing applies for every treatment and educational situation for anyone on or off the spectrum, right?
Absolutely.
So you take 100 really bright kids, send them to Harvard, they're not all going to have exactly the same outcome. And that's the best university ever, right? It's not a guarantee that they're all going to be the president of the United States, right? So, of course, there's a range of response to treatment. With every treatment, with every condition, with or without autism, whether it's ABA or not, not every person is the same.
Yeah. Now, as I looked as a parent, when I was choosing what to do, and I was exposed to ABA, and of course I went to the Young Autism Project, the LOVAS Project, and that was, at that moment in time, that was what was published. A couple of months later, some more studies came out that were really beneficial to me as I was going to IEPs. But at the moment in time that my son was diagnosed with autism and I heard about ABA, there was only LOVAS. So tell us a little bit about, for people who are completely new to this, what the Young Autism Project was.
Right. Okay. So that was the sort of the original intensive application of ABA to the treatment of children with autism, put together by Ivar Lovaas at UCLA. Starting in, well, I think Lovaas did his original work in the 60s, maybe the late 60s even, but then it really got up to speed in the 70s, and by the end of the 80s, they published their huge seminal paper, the 1987 Lovaas study, that really blew the lid off of autism treatment. It was the first study to ever show children with autism can make substantial gains, the first controlled study to really show that, and it was really controversial, and it hadn't been replicated for a while, but the good news is, in the last 10 years or so, there's actually been quite a few replication studies in different countries, in different states, implemented by people who who were not originally even trained by Lovaas, but are just doing good quality ABA.
Right.
Implemented in different languages, even in different continents.
Right.
So it's not specific to a particular genetic predisposition or a particular race or a particular country or culture. The same basic principles and procedures have been shown to work essentially everywhere where they've been done with a high degree of integrity.
And they've been pretty consistent in terms of outcomes.
That's right.
Across the board. You were involved with one of those studies, correct? The Arizona Card Project? No?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
Yep. That one hasn't been published yet. We're still working on the manuscript.
Okay.
But
All right. My mistake. I thought it had been published. But in any case, my understanding, and help me if I'm wrong, is that as they look at these, when kids have been given the right amount of ABA within a window of time, that's 3 to 5 years of age.
Yeah, really starting, the earlier you start, the better. Most of the best, the research that has produced the most robust outcomes have begun treatment at 4 years old or younger.
Okay.
It's not to say it's too late at 5 or 6 or 7, and maybe the goals of treatment and the scope of treatment are a little different at that point.
Right.
But the most robust outcomes for intensive ABA have started at age 4 or younger.
Okay. And in my looking at it, it seems that the outcomes come in 3 different groups.
Okay.
There's the group of kids who are deemed recovered. People have different words for what that means, but they no longer qualify for an autism diagnosis.
Right. Yep.
And that tends to be around just under 50%, around 47%-ish.
We don't know. Each study has kind of used different criteria for defining that group.
Okay.
Some studies just don't even talk about that group because they want to avoid the controversy. But if you look at the data, it's obvious that their kids achieve that. And so it depends. But yeah, it looks like maybe the highest range that's been found so far is in the maybe mid to even high 50s in a couple studies. And the lowest range in a good quality study looks like maybe about 20%.
Okay.
So we're not sure exactly what the range is. We're actually doing a study like that now at CARD, where every single child who is enrolled in intensive ABA, meaning 25 hours or more per week, under the age of 5, and we might look at the 5-year-olds and the 4-year-olds and the 3-year-olds data separately.
Right.
Every single child has been tracked their entire treatment, as long as their parents consented to it, which most of them did. And we're going to see after 4 years of treatment what the real percentage is.
Okay.
So we're going to know soon enough, probably within the next year or two, what that percentage is of recovery for CARD clients.
Okay, but so whenever anybody has done any of these studies, it seems to me that there are these 3 groups. There's a group that gets to the point where they no longer qualify for the diagnosis. There's a group that doesn't quite get that far, but they make tremendous progress. Everybody can point to it and go, wow, this child has made tremendous progress, but they still are identified as being on the spectrum. Sure. And then there is a much smaller group that a lot of times they have dual diagnoses, other things going on, other challenges besides autism, that the progress that they make, to me, is still substantive because they make progress with adaptive goals, things like toileting and feeding themselves and decreasing of challenging behavior, hitting themselves, that those are the 3 categories that they come in. So everybody's made progress.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I haven't met a single child with autism who wasn't able to learn something critically important to their daily lives in an ABA program.
And when I looked at that as a parent in the early days when we were deciding about ABA, and I said, wow, so on our worst case scenario, we're going to make progress from the things that we're on.
That's exactly
on our medium, case scenario is that we're he's leading a life that's semi-independent.
Right.
And then the best case scenario is he can get to the point where this is not on our radar anymore.
Right.
And I'm honest on the show here that we're in the middle group right now.
Okay.
We have not given up on getting to that other group, right? I always say that my son is recovering from autism on a daily basis with the help of our family. But I have to tell you that I didn't realize how good this middle group was. Do you know what I mean? Because I was always shooting for that other group, still am, but it's good right here. This is worthwhile. And I'm frustrated by the fact that people say, oh, well, if only 46, 47% of the kids, then why are we bothering to give it to these other 2 groups?
Right, exactly. And so...
Ooh, them's fighting words.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it is sort of an unfortunate misconception because a lot of the research, outcome studies that have been published, they do report the percentage of kids who reach this optimal outcome of recovery. And so sort of the logical implication there is, oh, okay, so 47% great, the other percent must not have done so well, right?
Right.
And it is kind of an artifact of the way in which the measures are reported and the types of measures that are used in a lot of these studies.
Okay.
So, for example, if you measure IQ, as an outcome measure, the kids who are going to recover are going to get into the average range for sure.
Right.
Okay, the kids who aren't going to recover but make a lot of progress, you might not actually see any change at all on their IQ. Okay, so they might still have some delay in their IQ or some deficits there, but they make, they learn hundreds, perhaps even thousands of really useful skills that make their life more independent and happier, and those don't show up anywhere on the IQ test.
Right.
And so it's an unfortunate sort of byproduct of some of the measures that are used in research. What's really needed, and I could talk about this for all day, is different measures to look at more concrete gains of treatment in ABA, like skills, like what skills did the kid learn that actually help them in their daily life, not just some sort of nebulous idea like IQ or like overall social adjustment or something like that, right? So those measures still aren't used very commonly in research. I think that's part of why people think, oh, it's either recovery or nothing, and that's completely false, as you said.
Do you think because of the insurance reform now, I can only imagine, and I've seen a little bit of it, where insurance companies are putting a lot of regulations on things, saying that they have to see progress, they have to track progress. Do you think that maybe a positive byproduct of that will be that there will be new measures to judge, to look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we have been using here at CARD, because we have the skills curriculum, is literally tracking every single new thing that the kid learns on multiple different levels. So you see progress every week. Okay, and it's all documented, and it's data that gets uploaded to the insurance company so they can see. And so it's very, very, it's a whole other level of accountability. And honestly, it's what ABA providers have been doing anyways. We all know it within ABA programs, but folks outside of the ABA programs, like funding providers, don't necessarily know it because they don't see our pen and paper data sheets every day. So that's why it's important to have some kind of system that is accountable and more reportable. And you're right, insurance, what they're trying to do is say, if a kid isn't making progress in the first few months, we want to stop funding the treatment, right? Which is scary, but at the same time, well, if the kid isn't making progress, they shouldn't be getting that treatment. Maybe they should be getting a different provider.
So that's the key, that they get a different provider,
not cancel ABA necessarily, but figure out why they're not making progress. I mean, in that sense, they're right. Kids should be making progress, not after 3 months, after a week, after 2 weeks, after a month, right? And so if they're not, it's time to figure out what's going on. Is there something wrong with the provider? Are they not getting enough hours? Is there too much turnover in the therapists, right? So they're not properly trained. What's the deal? But every single kid should be making progress.
Really very amazing. All right, we're going to take a short break and come back and talk more about some of the studies, because we talked briefly about the LOBOS, but some of the other studies that parents might want to use for an IEP. I know we did that around this time of year last year.
Great.
And we're going to have Dr. Tarbox tell us about how you can gain access to those studies so that you can use them at your IEP to get the job done.
All right.
So stick with us.
Skills is an online program that provides assessment, curriculum, positive behavior support planning for challenging behavior, and progress tracking, and it does this all in one place. The skills assessment and curriculum addresses 8 areas of development, which even includes advanced higher level areas such as executive functions and cognition, which pretty much makes skills the only ABA-based set of curricula for teaching more complex skills, things like problem solving, planning, self-management, perspective taking, and even inferring and predicting others' private events. Skills is a 4-step system. Step 1 is to add the child to your account. Step 2 is to start assessment. The skills assessment is the only ABA-based assessment with psychometric research demonstrating the language subscale to have excellent reliability. Every area of human functioning and typical child development from infancy to adolescence was researched, making the skills assessment the most comprehensive of its kind in the world, and we're quite proud of that.
Skills is easy to use. Simply click Start Assessment and begin answering questions. Or simply type in a keyword, find specific activities to assess, and add activities to treatment. Step 3. Choose activities. Once you've completed the assessment, Skills selects from a pool of 4,000 activities categorized by age, level, and skill type to provide you with exactly those activities each child needs. Start by choosing a curriculum, then a lesson, and finally an activity. Click the information icon to view prerequisites, ages in which targets develop, examples, and IEP goals. Click the video icon to watch a short video. Once you've identified an activity you want to teach, adding activities to treatment is a snap. Step 4. Start treatment. Here you can access customizable activity lesson details, add your own customized targets and exemplars, and edit an activity status such as introducing or mastering it. You can even print handouts such as worksheets, tracking forms, visual aids, and other materials. Skills also offers multiple progress charts mapping curriculum progress, lesson progress, and cumulative number of activities and targets mastered over time. The Skills language curriculum is categorized by verbal behavior type so that users can identify progress for verbal operants, such as echoics, mans, tax, and interverbals.
Skills is one of the only programs that provides the ability to write behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, for challenging behavior.
With just a few clicks, the outline of the behavior intervention plan is written for you and ready to be printed and implemented.
You can learn more about Skills today and get started by visiting us at www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call us at 877-975-4559. Skills. Progress starts here.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Our very special guest, Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, is here with us. We've been talking about making progress and looking at research showing how kids on the autism spectrum, and I say kids, but really anyone on the autism spectrum, is going to make substantive progress, and you made the point, if they get quality ABA therapy in the right amount.
Right.
And we were talking about some different studies and the fact that sometimes it's very useful as a parent to be armed with certain studies to go in and talk about the efficacy of ABA. I know that made a huge difference when I went to Jem's first IEP, that I went in with the young Lovas study, but I had also gotten a couple of other studies. I believe there was I know Rogers was one of the, but there are many different studies that you pointed to before that might be useful. Can you give us a quick sort of rundown about?
Sure. So there's quite a few studies that have been published since the year 2000 or so that have basically replicated what Lovas did and basically got the same results, more or less. Not exactly the same, but similar.
Showing that ABA is effective.
Right, yeah.
And creating progress.
Right, and that kids make substantial gains, and that when you compare the gains that kids in intensive ABA programs make to kids who are not receiving those programs of the same age, there's a huge difference.
Right.
A huge difference in the progress that they make. It's not even comparable in most cases.
And parents need to keep in mind that if you're here in the United States and you're going to an IEP meeting, an individualized education plan or program meeting, it's because you are entitled to something under the law that's called FAPE. It stands for Free Appropriate Public Education. Appropriate is the big word.
Right.
You're not guaranteed the best.
Right.
You're not guaranteed the gold standard, as the Surgeon General has referred to ABA. You're not guaranteed that.
Right.
But you are guaranteed something that's appropriate. And what these studies show is that ABA is appropriate.
That's right.
And then the question you ask them is, do you have something that has been proven to be appropriate? I'll be happy to look at your studies, and guess what? They don't have them.
Right. Well, there simply aren't any other educational strategies that have been proven to be appropriate through scientific research. The Denver model is maybe one exception. There's one or two studies on that, although it uses a lot of ABA. I mean, it basically is a form of ABA, a little bit more naturalistic, a little bit more developmentally oriented, but it's intensive ABA. And so, yeah, there really aren't any other approaches. Now, there's a number of different studies also that directly answer the question, because a lot of times what people hear in IEP meetings is, well, we have this really top quality autism program that's specifically for kids with autism. It's a special day program. It's going to be perfect for your kid because it's specifically customized to children with autism. Right. You say, well, okay, is it an ABA program? And typically the response is, well, we do a little bit of ABA, and we do a little bit of everything else too. So we have lots of different stuff. So you're not stuck with just ABA. You can have ABA, and you can have a little bit of the teach model, and maybe a little bit of floor time, and a little bit of occupational therapy and sensory integration, and a number of other therapies, right? And play therapy, and you name it, okay?
Right. And it sounds good when you're sitting there going, oh, somebody who knows what they're doing, we're going to be taken care of.
Right. It sounds great. And I am in no way intending to trash talk public education. I mean, ideally, ABA would be implemented in public education settings. And in some cases, there's a very small number of school districts, probably less than 1%, that are actually doing top quality ABA programs. And that's fantastic. In fact, we are training some of those districts ourselves. However, in the majority of cases, they're implementing what's called an eclectic approach, which means a little bit of everything.
Right.
And if you really want to be, if we're going to be honest here, and we ask ourselves, well, what's the evidence to support that? There have been a few studies that have compared top quality eclectic programs to intensive ABA programs, and without exception, they've shown the kids in the ABA groups do way better.
Right.
And in a couple studies have actually shown kids in the eclectic programs have actually regressed, have not gotten better at all, zero progress, at least compared to their chronological age, right? So as they age, as the kids get older, their skill development is actually falling further behind.
Yeah. So really essential, because we all know we're working against the clock. You want to get your child caught up, and you don't have time to mess around with what isn't effective, and the law says you have to have something that's appropriate. One definition of appropriate is effective.
I would hope so.
Can I tell you how many dictionaries I had to look up until I found it? But I did before the first IEP meeting. But it certainly makes sense that it would be something that is effective at showing progress.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of an IEP is to make an environment in which the child makes progress on their educational goals, which have been individualized. So if your school can't show you some evidence that they have been able to do that with other children, they're in a tough place.
That's right.
And it is combative, and I will say that. We're not trying to say that you go in and you say that and your school's going to go, oh, yippee, we have a parent who knows what they're talking about. They're not. But, we've talked about this before, about how sometimes you have to put your big girl or big boy pants on and say, I'm here to advocate for my child.
That's right. And unfortunately, public school districts, most of them, are faced with massive budget cuts and funding shortages. And the fact of the matter is, only a certain percentage of the kids in that district are going to get an appropriate ABA program. And guess who it's going to be? It's going to be the ones with the parents who demand it. And that's just how it is. I mean, that's an unfortunate reality in most districts.
And I will say that there's a certain amount of guilt that comes with being an autism parent. You've heard myself say, and many other parents that are here, that say at some point you make a bargain with yourself. I need to help my child first. And then I'm going to turn around and help as many other children as I can. Because the thing that I was always reminded of is that I brought this child into the world, or if you accepted this child as your responsibility, which means you have the responsibility to advocate.
And I will say, it's honestly not just for your child, because when you stand up for your child, what you're doing is setting an example, and you're setting a precedent. And so the more parents stand up for their children's right to effective ABA treatment provided by the school district, or in the school district, funded by the school district, whatever setting it's going to be provided in, then in the future, when families demand the same thing, the districts are more likely to provide it, because they realize, well, parents know what their rights are.
Yes, you guys write in and say this all the time. If you stand tall, somebody else gets to come and stand on your shoulders. They don't have to invent that space.
Metaphor. Yeah, fantastic.
So we have these studies, but sometimes as a parent, it seems like they're really far away. And there are services that are online that you can go and register, and they'll only charge you $30, $35 per study to get them. But when you're facing autism, that's not in the budget. But there are other ways to get the studies.
Yes. In fact, usually you can get, for your own personal use, you can get a free PDF copy of the study, usually from the author. If you email the author directly, and usually if you look up a study online and find the homepage for that particular article, on that journal's webpage, it'll say who the corresponding author is, and it'll oftentimes have contact information for that corresponding author. So it'll have their email address. If you email them directly and say, hey, I'm a parent, I really need a copy of your study, they'll usually send you a PDF copy for free.
And can I tell you, you told me that a year ago, and it so blew my mind. And I'm somebody who's very proactive. I'll call anybody, I'll email anybody. I have no fear of that. That never occurred to me.
Right. It doesn't occur to anybody. But
I didn't know that
was usually how it works, is that you're allowed to, as an author of a study, you don't own the copyright. The journal actually owns the copyright to that study, but you are allowed to distribute individual copies to other individuals for educational purposes. So if that's considered an educational purpose, then you're in the clear. And so, people email me all the time for copies of our work, and that's no problem.
Okay, great. And a lot of times when you look up a study, I don't know what the word is, they show you just the shortened version of it that has who the author of it is. So
the first page of the journal article has the corresponding author's contact information. But also people can email me at which email? j.tarbox at autismresearchgroup.org. And that's part of our mission at Autism Research Group, is to disseminate information, scientific information on autism treatment.
Okay. And I know many of you have written in the past. We've been able to share some things. You gave me some things and I forward them on. I hope that's all right. I hope I'm not getting into hot water here. We'll discuss that. All right. Not yet. Okay. So because we've been able to help some people to do what they needed to do, and that's really part of our mission here at Autism Live, is to help connect people with information that gets them further down the road.
Great.
So absolutely fantastic. Any other studies? I know in the past we've talked about some of the different studies. You mentioned some of them. Do you know off the top of your head what the names are for the ones that discuss eclectic versus ABA?
Yeah. So the first one to directly compare public special education eclectic treatment to intensive ABA was by Jane Howard and colleagues, and it was published in 2005. And so if you Google, or if you go to scholar.google.com, it's Google Scholar, it's the version of Google that's specifically for research, and you put in Howard 2005 autism eclectic, you're sure to get it. So that's a great one. Another great one is by Zakor and colleagues. So that's Zachor. And they are researchers out in Israel, actually. And same thing. They compared intensive ABA to intensive eclectic services and found exactly the same results. And I think that was published in 2007. So it was Zakor. So again, if you Google Zakor 2007 autism, and I think actually eclectic again, you'll probably get that. You'll be able to track that down. And again, your viewers can always just email me directly.
Okay, great. Wonderful. We should take a short break and we'll come back with more. And if you have questions for Dr. Tarbox, we're getting to the end of the show here, and I know a lot of times you guys like to wait to the very end. Now is the moment if you have a question that you want to ask Dr. Tarbox. The feature is live. We'll be right back after these messages.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is the Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome back to Autism Live. Our very special guest, Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, is here with us, and I mentioned before that he is the head of research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, but also the director for the Autism Research Group. They had a wonderful event that they did earlier. It was this week, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Monday, yeah.
Monday. And they really are looking for information from you guys. If you have something that you think, boy, I wish somebody would study this. I wish somebody would do research on this. Why has no one done research? I was just say, well, nobody asked me what I wanted researched. But if you have that sort of opinion and would like to be heard, they can go to your site for the Autism Research Group, and they can fill out a survey and put in requests for things that they would like to see.
That's right.
You hear from a lot of different parents, and so you track that, and you sort of take into consideration, and it drives the kind of things that you work on. And tell us your website again.
It's autismresearchgroup.org.
Okay. And you guys have already done a great deal of research, and you've got a bunch of things that are coming up. And we've been talking about research that could potentially help with IEPs and looking at making progress. And one of the things that really continually confounds me is how people can quantify progress when it isn't their child, and say, well, the progress, it wasn't really worth it, right? Funding sources do this from time to time.
All the time.
Schools sometimes, certainly not by no stretch of the imagination, the majority of them, but sometimes they'll quantify and say, it's just not going to happen for this kid, even though supposedly we have this attitude of no child left behind.
Right.
And it really makes me furious. I'll admit to that. That's when my blood pressure gets into a neighborhood.
I see it all the time. I mean, I have to say, I've seen it in almost every IEP meeting I've ever been to, is a real subtle attitude of there's something wrong inside this child.
Right.
That provides us with a reason why what we're doing educationally doesn't really need to work that well.
Right.
And I just think it's insane. But I mean, it's just so contrary to how we view the world in ABA. The way we view the world in ABA is it's our responsibility to change the environment until the child learns, period.
And I have to say, you know, as a former teacher, that when you begin teaching, I can't imagine anybody getting into the teaching field. I will say this. I met one person across all the years that I taught that said, you know, when we said, why did you get into teaching? You know, obviously you must have a passion for people learning things. And they were like, no, I like the summers off, right? One person, right? There's always got to be one, you know? So there are people who are problematic, but most people start out the passion of a young teacher who wants to make a difference.
Right, absolutely.
There is something addictive about the moment of when you see a child get something.
Oh, absolutely.
And I see ABA therapists that, like, this is high reinforcement for an ABA therapist.
I think that's how we all get hooked in originally in ABA is that moment that clicks when you see, oh my goodness, the kid can do this now.
Yes.
And it seemed impossible for the kid to learn this, and now it's no problem.
Yes. And you had even mentioned before on the show, because in the beginning I always like to ask people, how did you get into this? This is a weird business that you're in, right? Like did you wake up one morning and go, I want to work with kids with autism? And you had mentioned that you were a history major, is that
history and then political science. Yeah.
Okay, but you as part of a job went to a home where
just tutoring a kid with autism. Little did I know I was in an ABA program, which I soon learned quickly and got trained.
Right.
And it was incredible. I mean, it was a kid that the district had just left behind and had made no progress, zero progress in any way in years. I think it was about 6 or 8 when we first started with him. And within the first month, he started learning stuff that everyone had written off as impossible.
And it really kind of energizes you, and you want to see it more. I certainly saw that with my child, and I have admitted before that I had one dark moment when I thought my child was unteachable. And the people at CARD, Center for Autism and Related Disorders, proved that moment wrong. Never been so glad to be wrong in my entire existence, right?
Absolutely.
And it was just one little moment, but it was the darkest moment, by far the darkest moment. And I say that to people because I have no judgment. If you are at that place where you feel like you've given up, no judgment for there, but I want you to come back.
Right.
Come back and realize.
And I think every parent gets there at some point, and not just parents of kids on the spectrum. You know, there's a lot of challenges parents can face, and it does feel hopeless sometimes. In fact, I'd go so far as to say feeling hopeless is a normal part of being a parent at some point.
I think
you don't
you're
want to
right.
stay there forever, but
I think you're
visiting
right.
that place at least once that's what it means to be a parent.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I think that as an autism parent, it's because, I think all parents accept that at some point that a tantrum is going to happen.
Right.
But it's the autism parents that get caught in that groove of, and now is this going to be the rest of my life? Right. Oh, now this must be the rest of my life. Whereas other parents go, we are going to get out of this.
Right.
They have that belief system. And I started to talk about the young teachers because I think young teachers start out with that everybody is teachable. Mm-hmm. But when they don't have the right tools, just like as parents, when we don't have the right tools, you get into that hopeless space.
Of course.
So that then it seems acceptable to say, we're not going to get there.
Right.
We're not going to get there, so we might as well sit back and relax.
Right.
But I always want to reinvigorate the parents and the teachers to understand there are tools. And how do we give them the tool belts? I may have asked you this before, but I don't remember. Are we doing research yet? Because this is one of the things I want, about what's the most effective way to train the teachers to do ABA.
Yeah, there have been some studies, a number of studies actually. One of the things we're looking at right now is actually web-based training, which is never going to be a replacement for hands-on live training, but it might help supplement it. It might help it go faster. I mean, the biggest problem that the autism community faces right now in terms of treatment is lack of qualified specialists. So lack of people who are actually experts in supervising and providing ABA treatment, education, and therapy.
Because we haven't figured out how to clone you yet.
Right. It takes a while to make an expert ABA. I mean, you take like the brightest person straight out of college who has no experience in ABA. I mean, someone who's really a champ.
Right.
And it could take 3 years for them to get to the level of being able to supervise someone else doing it. It's really challenging.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge. There are some studies, though. The good news is there are some studies that show the very straightforward behavioral training techniques called behavioral skills training, which just means tell the person what to do, show them how to do it, role play with them, and then give them live feedback while they do it.
Okay.
So don't just explain it to them. Explain it to them, show it to them, role play,
Right.
Pretend you're doing it,
Right.
and now have them do it with live feedback.
Okay.
That model works.
Right.
And almost anyone. There's actually a number of studies now showing that parents, teachers, teachers' aides, pretty much anyone can be trained in a lot of the basic ABA procedures. It's not rocket science,
Yeah.
really. Sometimes it is rocket science, figuring out how it all fits together for any one given child. But
Right.
the day-to-day implementation is very, very trainable.
In fact, this week on the A Word, we show a different episode of the A Word every day of the week, one episode per week. And this week, they got to see a new therapist come in with the senior therapist overlapping to see what it was like getting that immediate feedback, where she's not interacting with a child, but giving the therapist feedback. And, so if you haven't already seen that, if you've joined us just now, you can watch that on the A Word to see what that looks like, training a therapist that's coming in. And of course, that therapist would have gone through an e-learning portion, and they would have gone through a classroom portion. And then now they're doing overlapping with a therapist before they have to take, I don't know what you guys call it.
A field evaluation.
A field evaluation.
Yeah, so any good quality ABA program has a pretty strict evaluation of the therapist or teacher's aide's ability to actually implement the procedures with the children, and they have to pass that before they're trusted to work on their own with the kids. So something you see all the time in school districts is, oh yeah, we gave all the aides, a one-day in-service. They're ready, they're trained, right? But no, that's not good enough. That's just the beginning. I mean, that's good, but that's just the beginning. Now you need hands-on overlap where someone who's an expert is directly watching the person do it with the kid with autism and giving them feedback. No, don't do it like this. Do it like this. Oh, great job. That's perfect. And specific feedback and evaluating, honestly, every detail of implementation and giving real clear prompting and feedback and then fading out that support over the course of, I think we have, 30 hours or something like that of overlaps in the field before someone is qualified.
And I was making the case, too, for parents watching, because, I know a lot of times parents get emotional about, wait, these are my kids' hours that we have funding for, and, you're going to waste it training somebody. And I had the complete opposite reaction to it, because the parent who brought us in and told us where to go to get therapy had said, know that you're going to be a part of training therapists, and it's going to be amazing for your kid. Because it's going to help them, if they get used to one therapist saying it one way, when another therapist comes in and does it another way, it actually helps your child to learn. So be a part of that and be a willing participant in that. Be a celebratory participant in that.
And, it's no coincidence that the best quality hospitals in the world that give the best quality treatment are also the top training centers in the world. They're teaching hospitals. So it's, the two things are not separate. Like doing a great job is also part of teaching other people to do a great job, no matter where you are.
And my thinking was, too, that not only am I getting the trained therapist who's there, but I'm getting two for the price of one. I'm getting a second set of eyes. And also, can I be honest, that because I always watched on a monitor and listened on a baby monitor, and when they were training the therapist, they were training me as well. Because I would watch each therapist make a mistake that was an easy mistake to make, and the senior therapist would say, hey, try it this way, it works better. And I'd go, okay, I hadn't thought of that before, but you're absolutely right.
And another detail that's really easy to overlook is when you teach someone else how to do something, that actually makes you better at it too. And that's just like a universal principle of learning. Right? That applies to everything and everybody. And so it's actually really good for your senior therapist on your child's team to be training other people. It makes them better too.
Keeps them on their game. And,
That's right.
and the basic principle of teaching, if you want to learn something, have to teach it to somebody else. We're working on that principle on the guitar, because my son wants to learn the guitar, so I'm going to learn how to play the guitar so I can teach my son. We'll see how that works out.
Have him teach you also.
That's a good idea. Maybe that would be faster. Really.
And he'll have fun.
Maybe that would be faster. He'll teach Mom how to play the guitar. All right. You have a choice right now, because we have enough time to get you out if you want to get back to what you have to do, or you can stick around and we can keep talking, but then you're stuck here till the end of the show. What would you like to do?
I can stick around.
What's behind what's curtain one? I always leave it too late and you don't. All right, curtain one. Okay. So we were talking about the studies, though, making progress, and the fact that people can get access to them. Any other study that you want to point to showing the efficacy ABA. We talked about...
Yeah, there's a lot. There's one by Cohen and colleagues published in 2006, and that was an evaluation of community-based behavioral intervention, intensive intervention, again, showing just tremendous gains. They actually, by some measures, they actually showed larger effects than the original Lovaas study. So it was this fantastic study. Sallows and Grotner is another study published in 2005 out of Wisconsin. A separate research group in a separate state producing very similar results, just huge, really robust treatment effects. There's a study by Remington out of the UK also showing very similar effects. There's a study by the Norwegians. I'm blanking on their name right now.
Is that the Ikes?
Yeah, Ikeseth and his one of his main students, who I'm blanking on his name right now. But yeah, Ikeseth is sort of the senior author on it. Sigmund Eldevik. Out of Norway, showing that center-based or school-based ABA, if it's implemented by expert supervisors, who they are, can have very robust treatment effects.
Cool.
So yeah, lots of good research.
And then a new study that came out this year that got all the attention. It's sort of like, it feels like there were a bunch of girls at a prom, and then this last one shows up, and she got all the prizes. And because it's been in all the news about, amazingly, there are some children who can overcome autism.
Or outgrow autism.
Outgrow. That was the big incorrect headline that the media grabbed a hold of, because let's be clear about it, no one outgrows autism.
Well, maybe 1%, maybe 2%, but there's no evidence in that particular study.
With no treatment whatsoever, some
people think maybe 1% will outgrow it, but I don't know. But honestly, that's not a significant percentage. So good for them, fantastic.
Well, also, I hate even putting that out there, because then somebody thinks, oh, well, my kid will be the 1% and do nothing, and that's horrifying to me personally.
Yeah, but what that study actually showed was the opposite. They did not show outgrowing autism by getting older. No. They showed people who did clearly have a clear-cut case of autism, then later on were no longer qualifying for the diagnosis, and all of those folks had treatment, had intensive treatment. So.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of us in the community have been saying, okay, so what will the next study be, and what could it be? Because quite obviously, this study sort of definitively, I feel like, put the period, and they got the media behind it to say that obviously, if kids get something, because they don't define it overly much in the study, if they get something and it's intensive-ish, is what I walk away with, that there's room for vast improvement. Improvement.
There's a ton of directions for future research. One thing I'd really like to see, and that NIH is calling for, is comparative studies. So that we know ABA works. We're starting to know that the Denver model probably works. We're knowing that different emphases within ABA can work, like PRT versus more discrete trial-based elements.
Pivotal
response training. The verbal behavior approach. We know that all of these different sort of emphases within ABA are effective. Be very interesting to see research that systematically compares, and maybe even eventually identifies this is the particular type of profile of a child who would be best suited towards this particular emphasis within ABA. That kind of research is wide open, and we're working on some stuff on that, but it's very challenging and very expensive to do that kind of research.
Okay. Sometime down the road, I'd love to have you come in and talk, since the Denver model is getting a lot of attention lately. I'd love to have you talk about what that looks like and what that is, because that's outside my experience of knowing what that is. And then maybe we'll have a parent on, if you're a parent who's been using the Denver model, to talk about, because a lot of us talk about what the experience of having intensive ABA in your home is. Love to know what's the experience of having the Denver model from a parent point of view, but also from, a researcher point of view. All right, fabulous. And again, if you want access to any of the studies that we've talked about, Dr. Tarbox, you can email him. He was very gracious about allowing that. But you can also look at the study and see the name, and sometimes there is an email address attached to it.
Almost always.
And that it's perfectly acceptable. This is mind-blowing information, and that you won't be greeted as a pariah if you ask, could I potentially have a copy of that because I'm a parent?
Email the scientist, say, can I have a copy of that for my own use, and maybe even ask them some questions for clarification. And if they're too busy, they'll say, here's a copy, thanks for your interest, and that's all, but fine,
But one of the things that I've learned in the last year...
You also make their day, by the way.
This is the thing I was just going to address. In the last year, one of the things that I've learned, because I always feel like, even yesterday, I was talking about this, about about how I don't want to bother Dr. Grandpichet. And somebody said, because I didn't want to bother her to say thank you for something. And somebody said, don't be that way. Don't be that way. And what I've seen across the board, when we went to ABAI, and I would run up to somebody and say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I'm a parent. They would stop everything. Yeah. Absolutely. What can I do for you?
Right.
So who knew that you guys were also approachable?
Most of us.
Yeah, we can't say that everybody is, but who knew? Well, we're just about out of time. So first of all, I want to say thank you to you for always coming in and adding all this information. And before we leave, I want to remind everybody about our very exciting week next week. We have a really thrilling week happening next week. I'm so excited about it. On Monday, and while I'm doing this, Emily's going to cycle through some of the ways you can get in touch with us. But on Monday, we first have Monica Holloway, the author of Cowboy and Wills. She'll be here, and we're going to talk about this news story that's been very public this last week about the child who saved, they rescued a dog, and the dog is rescuing the child, and they have this wonderful relationship. So we'll be talking about that with Monica, and also she's the mom of a teenager on the spectrum, so we'll talk about those issues. Then later on Monday, we have Lisa Ackerman from TACA coming to talk about their Real Help Now conference, and we have a very special guest surprising her. It's very much a secret, but it's really cool. I can't wait to reveal the secret on Monday. I'll tell you at the beginning on Monday. We just don't want it to get out to Lisa over the weekend. But if you tune in on Monday, I'll let you know who's going to be here. It's really hilarious, and it's fun, and it's huge. So then on Tuesday, we are airing the Temple Grandin, the new Temple Grandin segment that we filmed last week. Temple has a new book out called The Autistic Brain. We were able to ask her your questions. You guys wrote in an overwhelming amount of questions, and we asked her upwards of 30 questions, and we're going to air that all on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is going to come in for the Ask Dr. Doreen segment, and she is going to go through the new DSM-5 criteria for autism, break it down with all of us, and answer your questions live on the show. So it's a very big week. Very, very exciting about that. And we encourage you, if you already know you have questions about the DSM-5 autism criteria, to be writing them in over the weekend, and definitely to tune in on Monday to hear what the big surprise is on Monday. It's very fun. I can't wait to tell you once we're off the air here. So in any case, can you tell I'm excited? So we're out of time, but we'll be back on Monday morning. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.